Welcome back. In our weekly dose, we are talking about a significant medical problem that you may not have heard really that much about. Right now in Madagascar, more than 680 people. That was the report we got a couple of days ago. Now we're hearing the number is up to more than 800 people who have been infected. More than 70 people have died as a result of the plague. It's spreading at unprecedented rates and forcing international entities to step in to help. The problem, many experts say, is that it's hitting a very poor part of the world. Here's part of an international news report discussing this very concern from the capital of Madagascar.
Problem, it's poverty. We don't think about cleaning, we think about what we'll eat today and tomorrow. That is the issue.
Depth about the plague, how this happened, what's being done about it, what the plague even is Dr. Ali Kazarian. It's good to see you again.
Nice
Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit first about what is the plague. Some people think the plague, I thought that was gone.
Yeah, so historically in the 1400s, the Black Plague was responsible for more than 50 million deaths, and that's what a lot of people equate the plague to. From that standpoint, it's basically an infection that comes from small mammals and fleas, and the bubonic plague that everyone kind of hears about and doesn't really know. We don't really hear about it that often because it's endemic to places like Madagascar or the Congo. Even Peru may have it, and we still see these times. What happened here was it started early, and so someone would get a bite from a flea. You know, and that's important because if you go out and kill all the rats, the fleas jump off onto another vector. So controlling this means that you have to control the bite. One thing that's concerning here is that more than 600 of those 800 cases are a pneumatic form, meaning that they can transfer from human to human from a respiratory droplet or an air droplet from breathing. So in those videos you saw people with masks and things of that nature. That is the most severe form, and it can be uniformly fatal within 24 hours if untreated.
If untreated. So the plague has been around. It is a yearly occurrence for places
Absolutely.
like Madagascar. The difference, though, is that it's flu-like. That's how it's being transmitted, right? So if somebody sneezes, the air droplets, what have you. So versus the flea you can maybe control the rat population or what have you. But now how do you treat this? How do you prevent it from growing? Because I had statistics of saying 680 people, and within a couple of days, it's now more than 800 people.
So the thing that's really important for people to know, the plague is not the same plague as it was in the 1400s. Not necessarily in terms of a difference in the disease, but now we can treat it. So compared to, we were talking before about the difference between that and Ebola. Ebola is very difficult to treat. Here, if you identify it early enough with antibiotics that we see very commonly used in day-to-day life, it can be treated. So the important thing is identifying the source, finding where the regions that may be responsible for the higher outbreaks are. People with the pneumatic form, making sure that they're isolated, and also you find exposures, family members, friends, people that were exposed, and give them the antibiotics to prevent that from spreading and becoming more illnesses that are fatal. With the healthcare workers, that's also important to protect them because they're constantly exposed, so they're a lot of times given the antibiotics beforehand so that they're protected and taken care of, so that as they're trying to heal and help, they're not becoming a source of infection.
Yeah, and you see a lot of fear in these communities.
Absolutely.
Because when you see these international workers coming in their hazmat suits, a lot
it's got to be terrifying.
Are terrifying. But the thing of it is, you say if they get antibiotics early enough, it is 100% curable.
Well, nothing's 100%, but fairly close.
Well, okay. I know you're a doctor. You can't do the absolutes, right? 98.9%.
Well, if it's untreated, the bubonic plague is between 30 and 60% fatal. The pneumatic form is almost universally fatal unless it's treated and treated early. The challenge is the way that's presented. About 7 days after infection, between 1 to 7 days after infection. This is incubation period. So that's the time between an infection and symptoms. People get a flu, they get a headache, they get body aches, they kind of start feeling fatigued. These are very, very general symptoms where this becomes a problem with the bubonic plague. The way it gets its name is there's buboes. You get large, very large, inflamed, warm, tender lymph nodes in the groin, in the armpit, in the neck. And that's the most common and less severe form. When it gets into the respiratory droplets, that's whenever you get human-to-human transmission becomes a problem.
Well, that's my next question is, remember with Ebola, there were travel restrictions for people who were suffering from Ebola, and that obviously did not have a cure at the time, right?
Absolutely.
It was one of those things where you got, and it was a pretty stark outlook for those infected. What about spreading? Right now it's on Madagascar, an island off the coast of Africa. But, you know, if people are traveling and this is respiratory, you said pneumonic, that's how they're getting the transmission. How do you contain it?
So right now, you know, the World Health Organization and different organizations aren't too concerned about travel-based spread because most of the people that have an infection are going to be too ill to spread. to travel to spread the infection. So they're not feeling that well. The other thing is if someone has a very severe infection that's not treated, unfortunately is fatal, so it can self-contain that way. It's an awful way to think about it, but that's something that may happen. However, we have to be mindful of people, if they have symptoms, be mindful of that. So in the airports, they have the same restrictions. They're checking things. They're making sure that people who are exhibiting anything that may possibly be considered a symptom is not traveling to other places, because you don't want to have something that's containable and treatable to start getting into places where they're not expecting it.
Right.
So if in Jacksonville, Florida, if someone shows up with a fever and body aches, our first thought isn't the bubonic plague.
Right, no, it's not. You know, remember last year we were talking about, not the West Nile virus, but it was with the mosquito.
Many, Zika virus.
Zika, that's what I was thinking. Remember last year, whatever even happened to the Zika?
And that's important. You know, it's interesting. So when these things come up and we talk about it a whole bunch, once they're stabilized and we don't hear them as much, people forget.
Yeah.
So this is an issue in places like Madagascar where it's constantly present. What's happening now is that it's becoming a little bit more aggressively monitored and looked at, because we're seeing a more rapid influx, and it's because it kind of started a bit earlier. Normally this starts in November when the rain season comes and the rodents get out and have more exposure to humans. This started around August, a little bit earlier, and so now we're seeing an influx of not just the infections that are the bubonic type, but an increase in the pneumonic type, which is the breathing air droplets, and that it's not an animal to human transmission, it's a potential human to human.
Yeah, it changes the whole ball game.
Completely changes the dynamic.
Yeah, good to see you. Dr. Kaz Ryan, always good information, always learn something new. Appreciate you for coming on every week. You can find Dr. Kaz Ryan at KazRyanUrology.com. We're on his weekly radio show, which is The Conversation. It's on WOKV. I know you're on the radio taking calls every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. to talk about whatever medical condition or thing you see in the news you want.